tonight we wanted to make it more of an interactive session, and I guess with this number of people here, we'll probably have 2 breakout rooms later on, and take some discussions, because the matter we are looking to explore together is about helping people to, in English terms, biting the agile bullet. How can we show value, especially for managers? Because we come across various challenges whenever we are out trying to change things and change behaviors. And I think it's pretty clear that we're not succeeding all the places we could do it. So help us see if we can find some good arguments for that. And so tonight it'll be myself. Vibeke has a few things to mention, and so has Paul. And we'll just get on with it, and welcome everybody for showing up, especially those of you who have prioritized this over the nice weather outside. Both in London and in Denmark, we have to appreciate nice weather the few moments we get it. So thank you for that. Now, the road less traveled, and here it is, the kind of road that we often look at in order to get from where we are to where we want to be. And there's a lot of surprises on the way. And we're going to talk about that resistance that we might get from inside. There are, of course, a lot of other things that can pull the brakes, so to speak, but there are some key areas that we very often run into. And we've sort of grouped it into 3 and say, well, there are people in middle management positions that appear not to be too keen on this. There are people in some silos of competence who is not too keen on the agile approach. And sometimes there are individual experts that have an expert role in the company and the organization that are concerned about how that role will change. And I guess it's fair to say that all of these are afraid that they might lose something in the transition, that they are going to be sort of on the losing side of this. And first of all, I think one of the things I would like to talk about is, first of all, there's a mistake here that this is a zero-sum game. When I lived in the States 20 years ago, there was someone who said to me, well, it's obvious, if there are winners, there must be losers. And I don't really agree with that. I mean, there are such things as general improvements. And I think we should, first of all, realize that and be aware of that it is not necessarily a zero-sum game where some lose and if some has to win. The other thing is that, as we've talked about in some of the previous sessions here, we talked about various biases and psychological biases, and we'd like to drag out good old Daniel Kahneman again and mention that his findings is that when presented with a possibility for a loss and a possibility for a win or a gain, we react twice as strong. Let's say we have a possibility of losing $200, and here's another a possibility of winning $200. The odds has to be twice as good for us to accept the winning proposition. We simply psychologically react much more on the prospect of a loss. And that is apparently because we experience that we feel guilt over losing, because it's like something we had and now it's gone and it's probably my fault. Whereas if we didn't win something, it doesn't feel as bad. So there's this asymmetric relationship between winning and losing. So we have to have very good arguments if people are prone to experience something as a loss. So therefore, the purpose of tonight is to see, can we together help each other put together a credible value proposition? So how can we present that this is attractive enough that people want to be part of it and will choose it? As we all know, I assume we know by now, it doesn't help just people to get on with it and be agile. They have to choose it. Otherwise, they're not getting it on the inside. We want them to choose to participate in this. So that's sort of the statement from beginning. What is it we would like to try and do here? And that is to give that argument. Here's sort of a quick agenda, but let's skip that one. And I think, Paul, you would take over here.
Yeah, sure. I'll share my screen and go from my side, if that's all right with you.
Yes, you do that.
All right, I'll get myself organized here. So, so first of all, I think we'll go back to basics, and some of this may be redundant for some people who've gone through this before. But what I want to do is I just really want to look at the two classic forms of organization that we have there, and just try to and make some comparisons between them. So the one that we are probably all familiar with, and we mostly grew up with, is what we would call the classic hierarchy. And in the classic hierarchy, you have the boss at the top. You have the purple guys, who are all the middle managers, and I think some of my Norwegian colleagues refer to these people as the permafrost. I'm sure that's not meant as a compliment, but and then at the bottom of the tower here, we have the gray matter. So these are the people who are doing the job, and we have commands and resources are allocated and given from above. And the people at the bottom do the work, and they deliver their products or whatever it is, or the reports, and those things go back up through the hierarchy there. And the whole system is built for compliance and predictability. So somebody gives an order, somebody does what they're told, so on and so forth. So it's built for compliance and predictability, but it's not necessarily built for effectiveness, because all of these people simply operate in their own silos. So by contrast, we like to talk in terms of an agile framework, an agile methodology, where we talk in terms of a network of teams or circles. And we also like to think of these as self-organizing circles as well. And as with the principles of Lean, we start with the customer. So in this case, we've got a couple of customer circles, and alongside that, we have got what we call primary circles, which are circles which are there to serve the customer. So you see, they have relationships. The circles have direct relationships with the customers. Information goes backwards and forwards between the two. We may also have additional primary circles. So it may well be that primary circles C and D have got work that needs to be done that they can't manage, so that they will delegate it to other circles in the organization. And there may even be suppliers involved in that. And the totality of this we think of as being the value stream there. So the idea here is that we have fulfillment delivery going out towards the left, towards the customer, but also feedback. And then we've got requests for work, delegations, and feedback going back through the value stream there. And again, the idea of the feedback and the feed forward is that it is a circular loop, so that everybody is being kept informed all the time. Now, in addition to this, there are a couple of other little twists on this. So within our framework here, we have got what we call resolution circles. So when there are issues that take place in the primary circles that need to be attended to by other people, then you may have to throw something upstairs. So if it's an issue of a tactical nature, if the Scrum Masters have got an issue, they can't agree on something, then an issue might get elevated to the tactical circle here for resolution. And similarly, with product owners might go to the strategy circle, and then the team members might have resolutions in an operational circle there. So issues and ideas go back up into the resolution circles, and the resolutions come back down to the circle. There's one last little twist here. So this rather peculiar shape in the middle of the value stream there, we refer to this as the transient circles. So this is the final piece of the puzzle here. So when there are extraordinary circumstances that cannot be solved by any other means, then within a transient circle, you'll collect the best people from all of the other circles, wherever they may be, and you'll put them together into a transient team. Sometimes we would refer to this as being when something falls out of the normal domain into the domain of chaos, you bring the transient team together, they stabilize the situation, and then they go back to their normal functions. Now we call this agile lean leadership, and that idea sort of brings me to the next step that I want to talk about, and that is, if I can get my screen to advance forward. Oh yes, that's why it was, because it was here. Okay, so what I want to talk about now, based upon that, is this idea of leadership, because to some extent the word leadership has become very popular. And when words become popular, sometimes they have a habit of not having any kind of definite meaning. So people latch on to a word, oh, this is good leadership, or he's a great leader, but there's no real universal definition of what that means. And, and as an English speaker, I'm always kind of a little bit concerned when people start using language in a casual sort of way and being very imprecise about how things are defined. But I actually think that the word leadership is one that could do with being looked at again and looked at being redefined. Because in popular culture, we might think of leaders who are people who lead from the front, people who've got all the right answers, and we just go to them and they tell us what to do, and they're fearless and charismatic and pioneering. But in the world of complexity and uncertainty, which is where most of us live, those kind of leaders, to be frank, are as useful as a chocolate teapot, because we don't need leaders who just go with their gut. We don't need leaders who can just force through on the strength of their personality, because in a complex situation, sometimes nobody has all the answers. Sometimes you have to look for the answers in other ways. And except in the luckiest of situations, if you've got that kind of leader who just leads from the front, doesn't think about it, just goes with their gut, what you typically end up with is disappointment and frustration, and maybe customers who are looking for another supplier. So I just want to give you a quick example here, and some of you might be familiar with this, and I promise I'm not going to tell you, go through the whole story here, but I think some of the highlights of this are really worth recounting. So, so the book Turn the Ship Around is a story written by Captain David Marquette, whose picture you see on the other side there. And his story is that he was suddenly assigned to command a ship which had a very poor reputation. It had dysfunctional and disillusioned crew. And to make it worse, Marquette had spent the last 2 years training on another submarine and knew nothing about this ship. So it was on the surface, and probably underneath the surface as well, because it was a submarine, a recipe for disaster. So shortly after Marquette got on board the submarine, he started to realize that if he was going to make this work, he was going to have to do things in a completely different way. So what he did was he threw the Navy manual overboard, and he decided to take another approach, which in effect was changing the ship from one which was a strictly command and control kind of environment into one which was an agile environment. And if you read the book, you'll discover that the outcomes were extremely successful. And just a little checklist of the things that he did here was that he, first of all, he recognized what his limitations were. He knew nothing about this submarine. It did lots of things that he'd never really come across before. He also realized that the crew knew much more than him. So there was an enormous wealth of knowledge and skill within the crew, but because of the way they'd been trained, they weren't really very forthcoming about it. So that had to change, because otherwise they're all going to get killed. So he went about of implementing an approach which was called intent-based leadership. So in effect, he would say, well, I intend to do this, and you're going to have to tell me how to do it. So he then refers to his, if you like, self-organizing team of people who then act upon his intention of doing something, and they're the guys who know how to do it. So in order to get his crew to behave and respond in this kind of way, he had to give them a certain sense of psychological safety. You're not going to get your head blown off for making a suggestion or even for making a mistake, unless, of course, you're in battle. Of course, it can be completely different. He also decided that he had to try and give authority to as many people as he could, because in this complex situation that they're in, where things are changing all the time, sometimes you have to have people who can make a decision for you on the spot there. So he knew that he had to develop his crew. He knew he had to revamp the way that things worked. And over a course of time, he developed his crew. He gave them a pride in their job. He gave them a pride in their ship. And he made everybody realize that their collective success was based upon their collective efforts. And I think in some ways that is the essence of what Agile Lean leadership is about. And at that, I think I will stop, Kurt, unless you have anything to add to that, and let Vibeke take over.
That's fine. Thanks a lot. Let's get your input, Vibeke. You're muted.
Start by unmuting.
Yes.
And see whether I can get the screen to get rid of your faces instead of where I can show the dais. So thank you very much, Paul. Well, I have two cases I quickly want to run through. One is where Scrum actually didn't work, where it failed, and explanations in this organization were not really found. So talking to people, it left the people involved with these feelings about Scrum is frustrating, it's infuriating, it's exhausting. And I tried to figure out what did they actually exercise Scrum correctly, or where were the reasons to the failure. The other case I mixed in a little bit is a team I'm working with right now that has been thrown into the case of working with Scrum, and they are meeting some issues on their way. I want to start off with Jeff Sutherland, maybe also a known face for some of you. And he has this saying that he says twice the work in half the time is what we can get from working with the Agile way. And I get this as an efficiency statement. That's how it is interpreted. And it's actually, in my opinion, not what it's about. It should be about value growth. So I would have wished that he would have said twice the value in half the time, talking more about effectiveness from the team instead. What I mean with that is it's not really about the speed you're doing stuff. It's about building the right thing and make it effective like that. So what I meet out there is, and I hear, is that not everything has to be changed just because of Scrum. The managers in my case where they introduced Scrum, did not see immediately more tasks being moved. They didn't see anything move faster like that, and neither did they see all the dead wood that were cut out by the team. The team that actually figured out a lot of waste on the way that they could remove, but it wasn't shown anywhere. So thereby, the managers didn't really see the value being made. The product owner, he has got the responsibility of the what to make, but actually it seems that he just followed orders from above. This meant that the self-organizing sort of disappeared and was lost because it was just an order still coming down in disguise. And yeah, Scrum is not, oh, I just want to say the team that I work with there right now, they also have this outside coming, inputs from outside coming, and that's really creating a lot of impediments for them. They can't get the involved parties in the rest of the organization to change that. It's like long delivery times with almost no deadlines from the people who has to deliver stuff into the team. And as it seems, there's no one there really to remove these impediments. And I'll come back to that later, why that is. And on top of that, they still have to go all the meetings. That was the tradition in the organization, and not only the Scrum meetings. So it's put on top of it. And this Scrum team had, well, Scrum is not complicated, just change it to fit our organization, they were told. And the Scrum team had a 2-hour introduction, an explanation how to work with Scrum. And the Scrum Master was found within the team, and he should be still working in the team. And of course, they thereby don't get any time and knowledge from a Scrum Master that should coach them and protect the team. So that sort of fell through. And of course, this poor guy still has to do everything that he normally did before. And then this Scrum Master role was just put on top of his other duties. The product owner they have is former product manager who really struggles with the fact that he has to let the team self-organize. He continues to bring in new ideas and specs. That's everyday life for them there. And that's where they sort of make the mistake that the team doesn't really own the how. And in the complex products, well, that's, as I see it, really where we need the Scrum framework. And the product owner really thinks he helps by bringing in new stuff to the table and new, he's a very sweet guy. He really comes in and say, oh, I got an idea and this. And as the Scrum Master doesn't have the right education, he doesn't really know how to handle that. And also the team, when they do this estimation, they get no acceptance from above to put in time to experiment. So actually what we see is they're struggling to get Scrum to work, but we are actually back to, we know what we want, just get it done kind of line. The final touch on that is I went to a sprint review, and this it had actually turned into a little bit of a joke as well, as the stakeholders, yeah, they didn't have the time to attend these meetings, so they were normally not there. So now they have ended up with the sprint reviews to be sort of a status meeting within the team. So another Scrum value was lost there. If the stakeholders sometimes pop up, it's because they have also new ideas and features, not really to listen and see what has been done. So Scrum is definitely changed to fit in that organization. And then the final nail to the Scrum coffin, the lid of the Scrum coffin, is that they only have to build a part of the solution that has to be made. And they don't have access to the full backlog of the product. That means that they don't own the done criteria. So they can't test the product without getting something from another team. They have to go and collect that, and again, long deadlines and long waiting times. And actually, as I told them, I don't think you even have a clue whether you build something of value for the organization, and that's so hard for the team. So that lack of transparency of the product backlog and no sprint backlog of dependencies with others, and no transparency of the increments are really making it hard for this team to get the work done. So my final is, yes, when you talk to managers, you're right, sometimes it really doesn't work. And you often hear people, when I go out selling our Agemba product as well, you hear people say the sentence, yes, we do Scrum, but, and this but always brings something funny to discuss. I agree that Scrum is a framework in which you have freedom to change stuff and smaller things to make it work in your organization. But I really get afraid when I can see they mess around with the supporting structure for the team that should support you and your team without being rigid about everything. But if you want, I know, Kurt, you sometimes use the football players or the basketball players. If you want to be good at playing football, well, then maybe you should figure out first that you need a ball and you need a field and you need a goal before you start changing the rules of the game and putting different sizes of fields or different lines on the field. So that's what I see often, that these groundstones has actually not been put down. So that leads to that they know the artifacts, but they don't know why they are there. They don't know, why do we have these meetings? Why do we have a manifest? And what do we achieve by having these things? And you don't want to give it time to get there. They want it to happen here now. If you don't get results very fast, when you transformed into or changed into Scrum, then they give up very, very fast. And the roles are not clear, as I explained before. They don't have really an idea what the roles are, Scrum Master and Product Owner. And then the rest of the organization don't really want to change too much. They want to be called that they are agile. They want to be towards the world outside, say, yes, we are an agile company, but they don't really want to change too much. And that's the question today. How do we make them see that change is good for them? And I think I have transparency, as I explained. Funnily enough, it's still out there that you see some product owners or managers, or what they call them, they see knowledge to be power. So they don't tell everything, because that's not for the people who's doing the work. It's not their responsibility, which means that they shouldn't be told. And that's really a poison to development work. And then, of course, the self-organizing is lacking due to these things. Getting the orders coming down, like if you have to build a house, if you don't know what you're building, you have to carve some stones, but you don't know whether you're carving a bridge or a castle or a house. Well, I can see why it's the stones that come out as a deliverable, that they won't fit what has to be built. So how do we get management and to see this and get them to realize this is really a hurdle for us in Agile Lean House, to see these steps to make it work and be patient enough to do that. So that's one of my ideas for tonight. Please help us to find the value there. And then I think I'm off and hand it over to you, Kurt.
You're muted, Kurt.
Okay. So maybe you could stop your screen share, Vibeke. This I can't. All right, there we are. I think I have a couple of things I'd like to say about the about the challenges with getting people to understand it. But let's leave that till the end. I think now it's time to try and go out in the breakout rooms and talk a little bit about this. I'd like to just remind you of the slide that Paul showed you with the hierarchy and the network of teams. And whenever we do presentations about what could an agile organization look like, what would be the mechanisms that work there, we only get to that slide quite often. And people say, oh, stop. What happens to those purple guys over in the left side? Those middle managers, because that's us. And that's their primary. What about these guys? Where are they in the new structure? And I think that is the biggest challenge that we have, that is to present a value to them. But with that, I would like to let us jump out in some breakout rooms. I will, in the chat here, just, let's see, where is that? Send to everyone in the meeting. Here's a link you can get into, and at least Paul and Vibeke, who's Christian is also here, I see. So Tom, you can get into that. I hope everybody can get into that slides set, Google slide set. And
are you showing us something first, because you're not sharing screen, or we just jump?
I'm not sharing screen right now,
okay.
but I am in about 10 seconds. So when you jump in there, you will see this picture here. I hope I can't see what I'm showing you. I'm sorry. So this is a piece of paper basically with some vertical and horizontal lines on, and the idea is that we collectively now work on identifying first some objectives and then some strategies. So going back to this one here, I hope you still see this slide set.
We do.
Okay, so so what we want to do now is in the breakout rooms, and I've created 3 breakout rooms, to talk about what objectives would we set us, what would we like to achieve. I think we should probably just try and conclude here together now. What were the important observations that we had, and talk about what remedies, what strategies can we do to achieve it. And I think, Satya, you said something very important at the end of our session here about the people that that can approach you and that has a use for you. And so how do I, as a person in an agile organization, see my value if it's not up and down in the hierarchy? And maybe you could just repeat a little bit of what you said there, because I thought that was helpful.
Sure, thank you, Kurt. So I was just saying the conversation was like, how do we feel the powerful position in the hierarchy, and then when the same person is put into an agile environment, and now he doesn't feel the authority aspect of it, but he is in the position of empowering other people. But first he needs to feel himself more like a person in a position that who can empower other people. So the point we discussed, or I just shared from my small experiences, like it's good to tell that their approachability is the power that they have, because people tend to go to people for their positioning or their power, or that they think they can get the job done. Whereas in an agile environment, if we enable them, we coach them, or like we nurture them, saying that the amount of likability that you have in the team, people tend towards you. So then the number of people know you, or the number of people want to get connect with you, is the power that you actually have within you to get the things done through the team. So the likability matrix, or we can say like adaptability matrix or a easily approachable matrix. So we, in these parameters, you are way down very much among all the other peoples and the other leaders, which is the great power that you have to get the things done to the team. So this is what I have just expressed.
Thank you very much. So, so with that, from the other two groups, anybody has something to contribute with that was important, and perhaps
I'd
also
like Stacey to report what she said to us, because I think that is sort of the crux of the matter as well, if you wouldn't mind, Stacey.
Yeah, absolutely. So where we're at right now in the project that I'm working on is that we have sort of our project in front of us, and what we as sort of developers would like is just time to work on the tasks. And what our management wants is an end date and wants to see burn down charts. And so how do we balance that? How do we just sort of have them just give us some time to work and have us just show the value in what we're actually working on?
yeah. Yeah, thanks a lot, Stacey. Yeah.
Is that to some degree, Kurt, the idea though of working in an iteration, so that you've got a fixed period of time and you've got the beginning, or you set some expectations and you're going to review it after 3 weeks or 2 weeks or whatever it is. And if your management have bought into that, they should at least give you that period of time.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, to come up with at least what you're attempting to accomplish in that time.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks.
Yeah, doesn't it seem again what we touched on, Paul, in our little group about managing expectations, the sale of Agile, and it's again, I know nothing about this because I've never done it, but I mean, just as a general principle, selling anything, a project of any sort, the managing expectations and making sure that those are clear and what that implies for the customer too. I don't know, it seems it was a very critical theme.
Right.
Mm.
And
Okay.
go on, someone else.
No, it's just if you want to know the third group, I can shortly make what we found out, and that was actually how we want to make the values of the new organization visible. And then that's a big hurdle to figure out how to tell them that. How do we make that this way of organization is the real value, or what is the real value to the organization, and the objective to make it safe in the organization for people to choose another career path, to figure out how to sell the intrinsic value instead of the extrinsic value, what also you talked about, power over people and money, to figure out what's really worthwhile in an agile way to work to get a better work life.
Yeah, I think what was discussed as well was that we have to find a way of showing people that that there is value, there's self-respect and everything in other things than just positioning in a hierarchy. I mean, in the new form of organizing that we could do, like what Paul showed us, where there's a role like similar to product owner in Scrum and similar to Scrum Master, although they are not necessarily up and down in the hierarchy, they still have they contribute an awful lot of value, and there should be respect around it, and that's what people. Of course, the organization have to, just like Paul talked about with Marquette, they demonstrated what they value. That the organization must demonstrate that there is a value in it. So. I think any other good comments that were discovered, or let's just think about what strategies can we adopt to achieve some of this. Any good ideas?
I was just thinking of maybe it's a little on the side, but an example of someone who's done things differently. I just learned about, I'm not a football enthusiast myself, but I just learned about a Norwegian football team, which none of you guys have ever heard about. And all of a sudden, they beat Rome. You know, Rome comes to Norway and play, and they don't know what's happening. And what's the reason? Well, the coach for this team is actually a coach and not a team leader. That is the difference. He's not telling the team what to do. He's not paying large sums of money to acquire very good players. He has average players, but he makes them work as a team. And the Italian players didn't know what hit them, because all they were doing was just turning on a dime all the time, judging the situation and doing what was necessary all the time. And that's an interesting comparison. And then you look at the huge European football teams with billionaires playing football, billionaires training them and telling them what to do, and miserable results.
Yeah.
You didn't say whether the Norwegian game was on the side of a glacier, though, did you? Because that would have made a difference.
I didn't get that. Yes.
I said the Norwegian team playing the Italian team, they weren't playing on a glacier, were they? Because that would have
No.
No, it wasn't ice.
It was actually Christian and I experienced that together last week when we did a training, and they brought it up because one of the topics we touched on in the training was John Boyd's OODA loop, the Mad Colonel John Boyd, and his OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act, which is for tactical maneuvering, basically. That is what this team had adopted and trained so much that they could constantly outmaneuver the opposition, the other team.
Yeah, this team happens to live in a city where there's also an Air Force base, and so they had an F-16 pilot that they hired to do to coach them.
Yeah,
for mental coaching.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom, for your contribution. I'd like to, now that Christian started this, I'd like to show you those two slides very quickly anyway, because they also came out as a very practical example. The team we worked with last week, Christian and I, really were frustrated because they so much wanted to work this way, but they couldn't get the organization lined up to do it. And so I'll just try and share you the screen and the things we talked with them about, which is in fact extremely primitive, but it's a long time since we had to have that argument because most of that is gone. But let's imagine here's some work to be delivered. There are different skills required. Each color shows different skills. There are 45 days worth of that. That is like half a square in height is a day here. So there are 45 days. This group of people were organized the traditional way, more or less in a production line with handovers, and especially with a huge QA at the end, totally non-agile. And this was where they were struggling to break down and find the arguments, because management were absolutely convinced it was this was the right way to do it. This was the Henry Ford way of doing it. How can it be wrong? And at the same time, they had one huge challenge, and that was lead time. It had grown to ridiculous proportions where practically any job would take, 15 months to execute minimum. And there was about the difference between lead time and cycle time. Lead time being the time from the customer places the order until he gets something. Cycle time being the time they actually work on it, was above 90%. So there was actually 90% waiting time. And we talked to them, and here's an illustration. What happens if here's all the work. in this case, actually, it's very balanced. So this is how it develops. If you plot it out, they start on this item, and they start with the red, and the red goes to the green, the blue, etc., etc. If you count it up on the different deliverables, these are the lead and the cycle times. The first one is 10 days, and the same in cycle time, and then gradually it grows to the lead time. For the last one that came in here was actually 22 days. Now, if you instead put these people, and then of course this is exaggerated, you put them in a self-organizing team, and they can work in parallel, assuming that they can, of course, but then they would probably grab the small one first and get it out, and they would get that one out in a day because they could all work on it. And then here's how it would develop. You get up to 9 days. Now this is but that's 9 compared to 22. And we talk about that this organization's main problem was delay or waste in delay. So, okay, the world is not ideal. What happens if you have a situation where there's an uneven workload? So some of these people, the blue ones actually have less work to do, and so has the purple ones here. And so how does that chime out? And then you will see more holes and longer, and in the end it grows to 23 days. The other approach, if we have a cross-functional team where these two guys actually can help each other out in a cross-functional, but also people have more than one skill, which is also what we recommend. They can still balance it out very nicely, and we still have a very hugely favorable comparison. Now, this is overly theoretical, but even today, people fail to understand the power of working this way, and they think they have to use these handovers. And some of these illustrations we have to come up with to convince people that it is better. Any comments to that? I know it's an old illustration, but it's apparently still valid. Liza?
First of all, were you trying to convince them about Agile leadership or Scrum, or both?
Well, I was just trying to convince them that they should abandon the serial approach with lots of handovers and moving to cross-functional teams and getting management buy-in to actually dissolve some of those silos.
Okay, thank you.
That
And
was...
yeah, so that was just for my understanding. And maybe I just want to share an experience or a few experiences that I have done. And in that situation you were in last week, I would have suggested, well, would you like to do an experiment for maybe 1 month or 2 months? Let's try it out. It is, I mean, worst case, we can always go back, and best case, maybe we can learn from it. And when I, very often, I have not experienced, and I've done it a number of times, I have not experienced anybody saying, no, we don't want to do an experiment. Everybody, even management, they agree, okay, that is not so frightening, and it's not so scary, and yeah, just let them fail or whatever. So just an idea, that's what I would do.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, we've passed 8 o'clock, and we normally try and say, well, anybody who needs to go, of course, and we will stop the recording in a moment, and then you will get the PDF as well, so you can continue with that. I'd like to remember or to remind you of a few things that we do in the future. Here we have some upcoming training courses, and we also have still a webinar coming up in a little while.
Can you share screen, Kurt?
I share screen now, yeah. So here are some of our tools that we do. Recently we have introduced this cool estimation tool for online estimation. We have our workflow agenda. We have our agile cards, physical tools. And we have a webinar coming up in 2 weeks' time where Christian and Anne will talk about coming full circle with Agemba, using the tool for organizing ideas and agile workflows, where we will focus on the tool as such, and how that can improve collaboration also in the online scenario, of course. With that, everybody who has to jump off, of course, thank you very much for showing up, but we will hang around for a little while if there are more conversations going on here. So thank you all for joining us.